What's up, everyone? Today is a little bit of a different day. I have a podcast called That Creative Life, and a few weeks ago I had Gerald Undone. Hey, you can wave, I'll put you, there you go, perfect. If you can tell already, I'm trying to do minimal edits to this video. So, Gerald, no pressure, but you have to speak perfectly. So this will be a post-game chat of the Sony A7s III versus the R5 and R6. And this is where Gerald comes in because he's had experience with both cameras. You can check out both of our A7s III's first looks, reviews, whatever you want to call them. Mine was kind of just like rolling around New York City, testing out the 4K 120, the 1080 240. And Gerald's was a really good video that ran through in detail all of the nitty-gritty things that you gotta know. And I think it'll be really exciting to get more into those details today, with respect to also the other side, the R5, because I've been off the Canon boat for a while now. 5D Mark III, the 60, the Canon 80D, I had all the thing, had all the glass, and the A7s II was the first Sony camera that I was like, sign me up. This is so exciting. So that's why this release is so exciting. 5 years later, we finally get the Sony A7s III, and with that incredibly long run-on sentence, Gerald, welcome to the channel. And we're just gonna get into a discussion here. What are some of your feelings the day of all of the videos releasing of the A7s III? What are you feeling right now? Are you tired? Because these embargo times and all the videos going out, it's a lot.
Yeah, I don't really have any feelings. All right, I'll catch you later.
I'm dead inside.
It was, it was rough. I guess if you asked me like 3 or 4 weeks ago, I would not have had any idea what was all going to transpire at once. I think I was working on getting the Canon cameras at that time. And I knew that there was a Sony thing, I think, coming in July, but like maybe there's just an announcement. I don't know if there was going to be any cameras or whatever. And then
it was also mysterious.
Right? And then all of a sudden I have like 3 cameras to test, and then they're like, this is the embargo for that one or whatever. And I had the Canon cameras first, but then I was like, I guess I should post the Sony video since it's more timely. Yeah, so, and then I was trying to test them all at the same time because I thought that would be easier. You know what I mean? It's like, if you've got it set up, just swap out cameras. So
that's something I've learned with laptops is literally I'll get like 3 laptops. I'm like, oh, I'll just make a comparison video. That's much easier. No. Never.
Exactly. It's 2 videos
make 3
for one.
separate videos. Exactly.
So I ended up, I think I generally do everything on paper, old school for some reason, and then I use my notes to write my script afterwards. I think I have like 12 pages of test results, so I had to try to figure them out as to like which camera is this
so
for?
You literally have a pen and paper. Like, is it a legal notepad? Is it loose sheets of paper?
Yeah, it's like scrap paper that was like misprints or whatever, and so I fold the bad side in on itself, so I have like 2 sides. And I wrote like R5 on the one, A7s III on the other, and I just kept doing it, and then that would fill up, so I'd have to keep folding papers, and it was a ridiculous way to do it.
Yeah,
I have notebooks.
Glamorous.
I should just use notebooks. I have them and they're nice, but
yeah. So what are your top level thoughts with what are people, if you're a photographer, if you're a videographer, should you switch? There's all these questions that people have as they go into these buying decisions.
Some simple stuff, I suppose, like if you're like some clear messages. I mean, if you're into video, like if video is your main squeeze, then the A7s III is the best offering available to you. End of story. I've been following Twitter. I decided to make my Twitter a disaster this last week by posting my results with R5 as I went. That's a good way to never see a notification again, because like every time I log into Twitter now, it's like, you have 2,000 plus tweets to look at.
Overheating! People are just like livid about, but this is Canon. This is very Canon. There's always one thing. Always one thing.
True. We had this have you noticed that if you should like cut back right now to this moment on the podcast that you posted that on your podcast channel, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. We had a conversation, and one section of it was something to this effect. It was like, I said, and I mean, what are they going to do? The camera's going to melt, but the specs on the R5 are absurd. They're absolutely absurd. So it's like, there's no way, right? Like that camera's going to melt as soon as you use it.
Because of the specs, I'm like, there's no way that it's going to be practical.
where I could use it for YouTube, but also use it for an hour interview or something.
You said the same thing. You were like, right, and that's not like Canon. I was like, I know. They normally make the more stable camera, and Sony kind of goes on the edge.
True.
But now it's like they're kind of like, Sony's just kind of like perfecting the thing, and Canon's taking the, and we talked about this, and then you compared it to like Apple versus Windows or whatever. And if you look back on that now, we called it. We called it the Canon was going to be the one, and the Sony was going to be the other. So it's funny.
It's the fact, it's the fact that Canon is catching up because they were so late to the mirrorless game. And one can argue that, oh, well, they care more about photographers maybe with like DSLRs and stuff. But at the same time, Sony's been crushing it with the A7R, the crazy high megapixel count. So it's one of those interesting things where it still seems like Canon is new to the space. You know?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it was Philip Bloom who sent me, or who gave me, sort of grounded me a little bit with a reply. He said, he goes, go a little bit easier on them because you got to think that for them, they're like Sony in 2013 right now, relatively in terms of their mirrorless like development or something. So it's like, okay, that's fair. Sony's in their like fourth and third, I guess, depending on their line version, where this would be Canon's, I guess, second go around. So there's definitely
the real question is, what is around the corner in 5 years for Canon?
Sure. And then they might have, maybe they'll have like an 8K version of the A7s III then or something. I don't know. No, maybe we should. I was gonna say we shouldn't speculate, but maybe we should. We were right the last time.
Exactly. So with that, let's talk about 8K for a moment, because the only application that I have in my personal life is to like make videos for my 8K TV, but nothing like beyond that. Literally just now, I'm starting to get over to a 4K workflow for my videos, because for the longest time, I've been about perfecting other things, whether it's like lighting or audio. Like I don't care about 4K yet, but the fact that 8K has now come along and 4K is now the standard, I'm like, okay. And now with the A7S, the A7 III helped me get over to 4K. The fact that the A6600 and all these small cameras are doing 4K, once all my cameras have it and they can shoot slow-mo, I'm on board, right? But 8K, when is that gonna be relevant?
So, I mean, I can't ever tell people this because there's always going to be something that proves it wrong. But I know this. There's two things that I know. I know that the people that are firm deniers of resolution increases, whether even the 4K argument that we started having 5 years ago, where it was like, you don't need 4K, people only watch videos in 1080, whatever, all that stuff. That was nonsense then, because 4K looks better even if it's a 1080p video. And you were able to tell a difference back then that the 4K video was nicer looking. So it wasn't so much about whether or not there's a difference. And there was also some nonsense at the time of like, the human eye can't see 4K. It's like, that's nonsense. You can even downsample 4K to 1080 and you can see the difference.
It's pretty clear, yeah.
Yeah. So I've always been that if you have more resolution to work with, you can make a sharp or a more detailed image even at lower delivery. And so it shouldn't be a reason not to do it just because you're worried about delivery. Deliver at whatever you want, but shoot better. But at the same time, I've also heard a lot of people say that you need to have more resolution so you can punch in, you can do this or that. I can say personally, I hardly ever punch in on anything. I've gotten like more resolution for that purpose, and then I just never do it. It's the same thing, and we could say the thing about photos. I thought, well, if you got a 40 megapixel photo camera, imagine all the cropping you can do. And then you go a year and a half and you don't crop a single photo, like outside of just like edges,
Yeah. For video, I don't do it as much, but when I started using the Leica Q2 with the over 40 megapixels, and it was in the small form factor of a camera to where it was just so fun to use, I would bring it with me everywhere. And so the types of things I was shooting were more life. It was more of like friends and family and this and that, and it was so fun to shoot with. But because it was more in a natural setting and it wasn't like in a professional setting, I actually found myself cropping a ton, because in those moments I'm kind of more like just more flippantly shooting things. And that was the first time that I was like, oh, I get it. I get why people want megapixels. And I would sit there and I'd just be like, why are these pictures so beautiful? Of course, you have like the Leica colors and the Leica glass, which is special. But I definitely get the argument of the higher megapixels. So with you shooting with the R5, how is having that many megapixels? Is it 45?
Yeah, 45.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to me. So that's the thing. But I
Yeah.
would never discount somebody else's experience. I guess all I mean is let's be careful as a shopper to not just, because that's what I was when I made the joke about I made the mistake of posting on Twitter. It wasn't a mistake so much as like, but I did catch some of the replies, and I do see a lot of debate about the A7s III with it having 12 megapixels, the Canon with 8K, 45 megapixels, and all this stuff. And I feel like the numbers are thrown around frequently in a way that are not useful. So when I did the A7s III video that I just posted, I had this A/B test that was on Twitter already that was like two photos, one was 12 megapixels and one was 45 megapixels. And that was just trying to show that like for the gram, it doesn't matter. In fact, everybody thought that the 12 was better, and that's just because it like looks sharper because it's like, down res or whatever, or up resed. But so if you're a type of person like me, that's what I was trying to say. I shoot like thumbnails, Instagram posts, that kind of thing. Then the A7s III is an adequate photo camera. So we don't need to talk about megapixels because you know who you are. But if you're just trying to tell everybody what they need to know, well then, sure. If you have, like, I can speak about the A7 R4. If you're somebody that shoots birds, even with a long lens, well, long lenses are more expensive, but even with a long lens, often the bird is like this big in a frame like this. So you need the megapixels to punch in. And I would never take that away from a bird photographer because that would make their job a lot harder. But I do see people that are posting, where's all my megapixels? And then you realize that all they do is post like selfies on Instagram. It's like, you don't need any megapixels. So let's not trash a camera because of it. And it's the same thing with resolution. 8K resolution is great, but if your camera's going to melt with 8K, it's not a good way to go. You'd be better off with a 4K that you can use or something like that, as long as you know who you are and what you need. I think that's the more important question. So you found a use for them with your Leica.
Yeah, but with the Leica that I know, because it's all use case as well. I need a camera, and I still haven't bought one. I kind of want to buy one. I will buy one. I've been talking about it for so long. I'm deciding right here and now that after this, I am buying a Leica Q2.
For what? Oh, okay, I was like, for what a camera?
Yeah. I will say, for the reason that Sonys are so practical and great for what I do. I mean, they crush it on all YouTube fronts, on all some of the corporate gigs I still do. I'll use the Blackmagic because that's when I'm behind the camera, and it just looks a little bit more, cinema-ish. You know that life, the Blackmagic life. But a lot of times when I'm just like out with John, or I'm hanging out somewhere with family or friends, it's not inspiring for me to lug around my A7 III with my huge 24-7 f2.8 lens. That's how I would probably get the best picture, but it's just big. I'm not gonna haul it around. The Leica Q2, it's such a small form factor. It has that f1.7 lens. It has that Leica look. It has the connectivity with the app where I was documenting life, and that was exciting, and that's inspiring to me, because when photo video is your job, often you're not capturing things that you actually want to capture for like your kids and for your grandparent and for when you're a grandparent, and so that's what I've kind of just been going through in my brain as I scroll through all of my photos in my iPhone. They're all like screenshots and like social posts and just like screenshots of analytics. And I'm like, what? My kids aren't gonna want to look at what's in my iPhone. I need to step up this documentation game. So I think all of that to say, having a camera that inspires whatever medium or whatever thing that you want to accomplish, I think that's enough in itself. If the R5 is going to inspire you to make bomb videos and photo because you need more of a hybrid camera and you've owned Canon glass for the longest time, go for it. For me personally, the A7s III is the exact camera I've been waiting for so long. I've kind of been in an awkward limbo, honestly, with my Sony gear, my Blackmagic gear, and the GH5, because nothing fit what I needed. I need no record limits because I do podcasts and I do stuff like this a lot, and also for interviews. And I need more of a crispy look when it comes to multicam stuff. And I can't figure out a good combo of Sony cameras to accomplish that. And so it's taken a minute, but now Sony has finally arrived to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm inspired again. I'm stoked again. This is going to be great. This will very easily cover 80% of my basis for the next 3 years. And I feel like, don't you feel like we've kind of arrived finally after a couple years of weirdness with Sony?
Absolutely. I'm in the exact same boat as you. That's why I ordered multiple A7s IIIs.
You ordered 3, right?
Well, I'm shooting on the Blackmagic right now, but I have an A7 III that I use for like B-roll and for photos. And then I have other cameras that I use like when I'm like trying to test and do comparisons and that kind of thing. And I used to shoot Panasonic, so just kind of like a disaster.
I feel like we were kind of almost exactly the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Panasonic, Sony,
but I was the same thing.
Blackmagic.
But each solved a problem. So you kind of had to have like all these different tools, right? And usually I'm that way. I think that if you need separate tools for the job. And then Sony was like, what if you didn't? And I was like, well, then I will buy them all. And then that's what I did, because I used it and I was like, there's some things it doesn't do. It is not a cinema camera, but I'm willing to make those like minor compromises because I was going to get the C300 Mark III to do this and then keep my A7 III for that. And then maybe and then I have the A6600 for like my little portable camera and stuff. But I'd be willing to just do like all 3 A7s III now that I've come to terms with the fact that I don't need greater than 12 megapixel photos by actually using it as a photo camera and being satisfied with the results. But I think it's hard to give advice because of that reason. But if I tried to answer your original question that I didn't well of the Canon versus the Sony aspect, I mean, if I had to give advice like today based on my experience with all the cameras, it is tough though if you're already like stocked up in a bunch of lenses. So I can only really answer this question if you have no lenses and you're just wondering about the bodies, I think you'd be better off if you need both. Because I said for video, A7s III is the best video option right now. It's not up for debate. And if anybody tells you different, it's crazy. That's the best.
And even
mirrorless.
What you said, you wouldn't be able to do this recording beyond 30 minutes in 4K with the R5. Like there's a lot of what you just said you couldn't even do with the R5. I couldn't do podcasts with the R5.
And I think people discount that purpose. You'll see that on Twitter too. They'll be like, well, who needs to record for that long?
And I'm like, I record all the time that long.
Yeah, and then the people are like, oh, just YouTubers. I'll give you a hot take on this that I was saving for my video. So world premiere of one of Gerald's winning arguments he's been holding on to of actually using the R5. So people say this. They'll say, yeah, but in a real world, hate that phrase. They'll say in a real world, you don't shoot for that long. You shoot in like short durations of takes. You're absolutely correct. You can't do that with the Canon. But why? It only has, you can record for 10, 15 minutes. Correct. You have to turn the camera off. So you can't frame up a new shot. You can't focus. And because if you're using those RF lenses that you like so much, if you turn the camera off, the camera goes out of focus. You have to refocus when you turn it back on, which is time spent setting up the shot, framing, making sure your light's good. Now your heat's going down again. So you gotta turn the camera back off after that shot. How are you gonna frame up the next shot? It is not a production camera. It cannot be used in a production environment reliably because your duration between how long it takes before you can do your next take increases. And the cinema cameras that they're comparing it against that also only shoot short durations, the fans kick into overdrive as soon as you stop recording. And you can still frame up the shot, you can still see everything, and the fan's cooling everything down, you're lining up the shot, the director's monitor is relaying off of that, your HDMI output or your SDI output is still working, everything's good to go. Now you roll, the fan's quiet, it starts to get warm, but long enough for you to take a take, stop, everything starts making noise again. You can't do that with the R5. There is no way to go into non-shoot mode while you set up. It doesn't work. So those arguments are null and void. If you need video, do not buy the R5 unless you're okay with EOS R video. That's what you can do with the R5. You can shoot the same video that you could on the EOS R with less of a crop. If you want anything more than that, it is not your camera for you.
Right. And the fact that we have now arrived in this 4K world with all these cameras, now 4K 120, like I said earlier, I'm like, okay, in my brain, we've arrived in 4K. I am now shooting all videos in 4K. The irony of this one not being in 4K, because you're probably not even watching this. Maybe you're just listening to this, so it doesn't matter. But my brain, because of all the laptops and desktops, how they have innovated along with the cameras, I'm like, okay, I am now okay with 4K. I now have a good Google Drive flow. If I'm working with another editor, I can confidently work in 4K. I confidently have a proxy workflow if we need, because there are certain things that you have to change up when you have the higher file sizes. And I wanted to talk to you about the new Sony codecs, the new H.265s. And you said that is really tough with your PC, right? Because I had the same experience, but then when I moved it over to my iMac, it was actually not that much of a problem. So we took a minute to get in the weeds, but this is why I have you here. I want to go into the weeds with you. I want to talk about bitrate. I want to talk about codecs. Can you talk a little bit about this new XAVC-HS that Sony has brought into this new camera, that it's 2 times the efficiency, so that means half the size, but what does that mean for the workflow when you have that footage on your computer? Why is it a little bit more sluggish and hard to work with?
Yeah, so if you think of the chain inside the computer as basically like an unpacking device, then the better the compression in the camera, the more unpacking the computer needs to do, which is a job that you're dedicating resources to. There's 2 things at play. There's compression, and then there's, we'll call it like the sequencing, if you will. So like, I like to say like IPB or long GOP or all I. So there's that, and then there's the compression. The easiest thing for a computer is one that isn't compressed and isn't like predictively sequenced, where it's just like it has all the photos, all the images, and it's not compressed. If you start doing things to either side, then your processor is going to have to spend time on those. And if you do a lot to both things, then most computers start to really struggle. And that's what happens with H.265. They're using, there's actually 2 things, Sony versus the Canon here. The Sony's has an all-intra H.264 version, and that's pretty decent. You can edit it quite easily. It's compressed like H.264. But you need that
CF Express or a heavy-duty SD card.
You can record
okay, this is something, let's go on a little tangent here.
Okay.
It didn't work for me.
Oh, really?
I had a 300, because I saw in your video you mentioned that it didn't work for you either. You had to go through some cards. I was using a Kingston 300 megabytes per second card, pretty fast card, and I could not do anything beyond the normal XAVC-S. I could do 4K, 120, whatever, but I couldn't do the all-intra.
I could with my compatibility thing, I think maybe I didn't want to spend too long on it because I thought it was something that was going to be fixed right away, and I just wanted to throw it out there. My thing wasn't that it couldn't perform. When I stuck those cards in my camera, it immediately popped up and said, unable to read card, get it out of there. And then I would take it out and stick it in my A7 III and it would work. I'd format it, put it back in, wouldn't work. And that was like a tough G64. I'd grab a different tough G64 with the same model number, stick it in, it would work.
Interesting.
So it was like,
I got the notification when I hit the record. It said unable to perform, insert, blah, blah. So that
Josh Yo had that problem. He sent me a video of it. He was like on location and couldn't do it. It kept saying his card wasn't fast enough. But he showed me his card and I was like, that should be fast enough. So I honestly think that this is probably the biggest issue with the camera right now. And
it'll be hopefully fixed with firmware.
It would be absurd otherwise. I mean, Sony put so much effort into all the little features that they worked on in the camera to then release a camera that can't write to the card, throw it in the garbage, right? So it would be a giant PR nightmare. So I feel confident that that it won't be there. But I'll tell you, I will post a video day 1 if it has card writing issues so that it gets fixed. You know what I mean? As quickly as possible.
Maybe we just found our Sony Gate thing. So we have the heating with Canon, and now Sony is the SD card issues. Get your act together. No, I was thinking like, oh, maybe I'll just have to wait for the CF Express Type A. But then once I stepped back and I was like, this is 300 megabytes per second. It should be fine. Isn't this the whole point? Anyway, sorry. Go back to your decoding, coding.
Yeah,
if you even remember. Yeah, sorry.
All intra is a good way for computers to be faster because they don't have to figure out what these predictive frames that came before and afterward. They can just see full images as you go along. That's what all intra means. Everything is an intra frame. But then you can decide how you want to compress that, either as H.264 or H.265. On the Canon, their all-intra is H.265, which makes it still tough because although now it has all these intra frames, they're so tightly wound that the computer still needs to unpack that. So the H.264, which still needs to be unpacked, but because it's only half as tightly compressed, if you will. It only takes half the job to unpack it. So that's one aspect of it. If you use an H.265 IPB, which means the computer needs to figure out the predictive and bipredictive frames and unpack a tightly packed H.265 on conventional computing methodology, it is very difficult for sort of a multi-purpose processor to do that, which is why they develop things that tackle that specifically. Some GPUs are working on that, obviously. And then I'm told that Apple's iPad does this extremely well, where they're like, I might be confusing this, but like the iPad Pro, I think has like a proprietary chip in it that can like just stream H.265 without an issue. But then you could take that same file and throw it in your like $20,000 Mac Pro, and it starts chugging. So I think some people are excited that maybe the new Apple stuff, where they're making their own silicon now or whatever, might be H.265 friendly. But as it stands,
I forgot about that. Yeah,
you need like a special chip if you want it to be a good time. But if you're just using a regular centralized processor that's supposed to do everything, throwing IPB H.265 at it is going to bung up your video editing. And you're going to want to transcode that if you can.
A lot of people get confused that, okay, you have an SD card and the read-write speed is 300 megabytes per second.
Yep.
But then you go and you look in your camera and you see, okay, but the video bit rate is, you know, the all intra is 600 megabits per second. And I see a lot of confusion. You know, they see 600 megabits per second. Oh, if my SD card is 300 megabytes per second, like, are those the same thing? Will my SD card work? Can you, in simple terms, explain how those two are, how they work together, and how you can translate that to like, oh, I have a fast enough SD card. Oh, I have a fast enough CF Express card.
Okay, so first off, there's 8 bits in a byte, and that's just a unit thing. Just like there's so many centimeters in a meter or whatever. So if you have something that can read 100 megabytes per second, it can read 100 or 800 megabits per second. That's just the way the math works. The issue, though, is what you're doing with that card, where you're sticking it, and the thing that you're sticking into, what it does with it. So the card might have a theoretical, top speed of, say, 300 megabytes per second. Read, I think, would be like a UHS-2 kind of like upper limit on an SD card, right? But that doesn't mean that the camera that you're putting it in can write the file at that rate to the card, which is why they have like different designations on them. Like those cards often say V90, which means that they can write 90 megabytes per second to the card with a video stream reliably. But then that still is dependent upon the camera. So some people will go as far as test a whole bunch of top class SD cards and then give you the results and then measure them against what the camera needs and let you know which cards are safer to buy. Because you'll find that sometimes you'll be looking at a 300 megabyte per second card, but let's say the GH5 can only write that card 47.2 megabytes per second. And I mean, that's just out of your control. That's just how fast that camera's throughput to that SD card slot is. You know what I mean? And that's not something that you can see written on the card. And it's never written on the camera either. They don't ever tell you what their like read-write speeds are. They tell you what you need for the codec. So it's tricky there. You can do the math on the 8-to-1 bits to bytes thing, and that can maybe help you out. Like theoretically, a V90 card should be able to write 720 megabits per second, which should cover you for most codecs. But if your codec goes up to 600 megabits per second, the chances are that your card speed is going to be slow enough by just, again, how fast the camera writes it, that it's going to drop below that 600 megabits at least some of the time, that it no longer becomes viable. So I would say generally look at half of your card's value if you want to be like in the safety zone, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, and see, I never even thought about, okay, what are the capabilities of the specific camera? Like, because that's very rarely on a spec sheet. Like, do we know that of the A7S?
Almost never, yeah. You need a third party to like I said, you need somebody like me to be like, I'm going to test memory cards today and then spend like a week doing it. You know what I mean? What you can do, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna say you can
Zoom.
you can stick you can stick the card in your card reader in your computer, and you can transfer a file, and you can look at the write speed, and you'll find it if you have a proper card reader, you'll find you hit pretty close to the targets on the card. Still never perfect, but you might hit like 250 on a 300, right? And then you have to think your camera is not your computer. It's slower than your computer. How much slower? Like how many multiple slower? Now it's transferring stuff to the card while also doing video or whatever you're doing, right? So then the write speed goes down. It has to be obviously fast enough for whatever codec they have in there, but not necessarily like fast enough. And it's also dependent on the particular cards and everything too, which is why...
So many things to worry about. I know, because that's when I was first... learning also about, because when they said CF Express for the Sony, I was just thinking, oh, CF Express Type B. And then you Google Type A, you don't really find anything for Type A.
True.
And I was like, wait, so is this a whole nother card that we don't know about? Because I knew of, the
smaller
QXD.
Than an SD card even.
Which is crazy. And so that'll be exciting to see that hit the world. But we know right now the A7s III, it either needs that V90, so that's an important, I haven't looked at my Kingston 300 megabytes per second cards, but I don't know if it has that nomenclature, that logo of the V90. So I guess that's the most important part of the SD card if you're using for video, right? If you want to record that all intra, the 600 megabit per second video, that's what you need.
Apparently it still won't work though. I think maybe due to some limitations. I think the 600 has to be to CF Express. That's the only one that I wasn't able to do. I could do...
Okay, so we were just talking about the HS.
Yeah, HS I can do, S I can do, and all intra I can do. But you can't do all intra if you're also in S and Q mode, the in-camera slow motion, because they increase the bit rate for the S and Q mode so that you preserve the bits of the higher frame rate, so you can actually get like way more. You definitely need CF Express for that. But I'm the type of person that generally doesn't like to spend too much on storage, because I think that storage always comes out with ridiculous prices, and then you end up with these, dated things in a couple of years where the size isn't big enough, but you spent $500 or $800 on a card. I'm with you. But CF Express does have something going for it, and I'm glad that Sony's like I said, one of my favorite things about the camera was this card storage array is like the best I've ever seen. It has 2 UHS 2 SD card slots, so you can go the less expensive route if you don't need them, but it also has 2 of the CF Express Type A slots, because a lot of what I just said doesn't apply as easily to CF Express because the bus is different. So just like with computers, if any of your listeners are into computers, when you get faster drives all the time, like it started with like hard drives that, used like, actually that even used older formats, but then there was like SATA hard drives, and they switched to SATA SSDs, but then they switched to...
And then there's so many different types of SSDs.
Yeah, and now they use like NVMe drives, but the NVMe drive was still on SATA. Now it's PCI Express NVMe drive, so it's like different ways to like communicate with the main board. So these CF Express cards are using that same PCI Express type bus that you would connect your like NVMe storage or graphics card and stuff like that to your computer. It's the same communication method for the cameras. So that whole limit we were talking about of like, well, it depends on how fast the camera can communicate with the card. This is the way to eliminate that. But right now it costs way more than SD cards, right? But it does solve the problem.
Yeah,
so,
and I'm excited for all the different options, and you went into detail in Gerald's video about the different options of the relay recording, you can do the relay, you can do the backup, you can continue to record, open up the hatch, put in a new SD card, put in a new CF Express as you're recording, continue that, and which is crazy. So if you just want to record all day, you hook up the power to the USB-C, and then you just keep, switching out SD cards.
Like you go for you could unload the footage, I suppose. You can have somebody like, you throw them a card, they offload the footage, throw that card back in the camera while you have the second one, and you could just literally record indefinitely. It'd be rad.
Yeah.
I mean, if
so
that's what
live your life, guys. We don't know what you want to do. Okay.
Exactly.
And I think that's why it's exciting. There's so many possibilities. Obviously, like this conversation started Canon versus Sony, but you can tell that we're pretty excited about the Sony A7S.
You just wanted to talk about Sony the whole time.
I know.
You got me out as your resident Canon expert.
I'm gonna be a freaking Sarah's such a Sony fanboy. Fangirl. I'm so used to the fanboy wording.
You can be a fanboy if you want. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Fanboy. Thank you. But is there anything you want to say? This is such like a cheap shot, but anything else about the Canon that you want to say? I'm just so excited that we finally got what we wanted from Sony after a couple years of, being in that middle ground. So that's where the excitement comes from. Yeah.
And as a person who's like video, 80/20, the A7 III is perfect. A7S III is perfect. But there's other people out there that aren't that ratio. If you're higher photography ratio and you want to do stuff, like I said, that 12 megapixels isn't going to cut it, then sure. I think I can define briefly a use case for the R5 for people who are interested, because I think that's where we're lost right now, is who is the camera for? And I think that's all I'm going to focus on with my video, but I'll give you the spoiler version. A photographer who is okay with uncropped EOS R video when needed. It is not for somebody to shoot 8K with. It is not for production video. It is not for 4K 60 shooting either, unless you want like just tiny intermittent clips. But be careful, if you shoot photos all day, you will not be able to shoot 4K 60 on that camera because the heat goes up. So again, if you just get it in your head, I'll get the same video quality that I'd get out of the EOS R. So somewhat limited dynamic range, not the sharpest 4K in the world. That mode you can put it in, and it doesn't really have any issues except for the 2959 limit. So again, it's not for podcasts, it's not for YouTube videos, it's for a photographer who wants a high resolution camera. It's a competent photo camera. It's nice to hold, nice lenses, good ergonomics, feels good, looks good. It's a great photo camera. And you can shoot EOS R, low res 4K, low dynamic range 4K, because you don't care about the video. It's just, you want to just throw some video downrange here and there.
Right.
You can do that.
And a lot of people like Canon colors, which, I mean, when I shot with the EOS R, maybe only twice, I was like, okay, I get it. Like,
sure.
I get it. This is nice. This is fun to color grade, great skin tones. But again, I've just found my flow with the Sony picture profiles, and I really have one dialed to where I can get exactly what I want out of all videos.
Sure.
So yeah, I guess it comes
Plus,
down
I'm
to
the opposite.
your specific needs.
I've always thought that the Canon color science argument was a silly one, because it's actually inaccurate color. So I'd rather have accurate color to start, and then I can swing it to Canon if I want, rather than start with inaccurate color.
But not everyone is like you, where they can be, creative in post. I think a lot of people like that straight out of camera.
Right. And if you are a straight out of camera person, then you should get a camera that makes your life easier. And if that's Canon for you, then giddy up. But I will say one thing about that same statement I just made, because I think I define an R5 user. But if you're somebody like who's now in the middle, like a 50-50 user, because we described going one way or the other, I don't think that I would advise anybody to buy these new Canon cameras if you're that 50-50 user. I think that and assuming that you were going to spend some money, I was going to say that, because we're talking about, like, what is the EOS R cost? It's like $4,000 or whatever, right? So we're talking expensive cameras here, and they got a big lens. Prices, the RF lenses are expensive too. So if you're a 50-50 shooter, you kind of touched on this earlier on, and I think it's actually the correct answer. If you have the budget, an A7s III and an A7 R4 is the number one combo. And that's expensive to get those two, but that combination unfortunately renders the entire Canon lineup obsolete. Yeah. Because the photos are better on the A7 R4,
and they
just
they do it so well. Like the A7R does photo so well.
And
the A7S
and it's a reliable video camera
so well.
too.
Yeah.
So you can use as your B video, use the A7S III as your B photo, switch and swatch. Those aren't words.
Yep.
And you're good to go.
And then, I know we're talking about big numbers here. If you need like a super middle solution and you just need one,
get a Fuji or something.
Get a Fuji, because that's funny.
Yeah.
Those are really fun to shoot photos on, and the color is beautiful. Every time I use a T3i or a T4i, just the colors, I liken them to.
What are you talking about? Canon Rebel cameras? You mean XT3 and XT4?
Oh wait, what did I say?
T3i.
Oh, that's so funny.
Sarah's over here pitching the T3i.
XT4? Isn't that did I say I?
You said T3i, which is like a Rebel T3i. It's
that
like
is so funny. That
everybody's
was my first
DSLR. Exactly.
I meant X-T3 and X-T4
what were you going to say is your
with Fujifilm?
Exactly. They are great like 50-50 cameras.
Yeah,
What were you
yeah.
going to say was your 50-50 camera option?
The A7 III.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
you can start, that's at that sweet mid-range 20 megapixel. If you have the interest in investing into decent lenses and you think Sony is the way to go in the future, something that we haven't talked about this entire time is lenses. So it's really like, what company are you marrying to? And you start
so true.
that journey with the lenses bit by bit, and then you wake up 5 years later and you're like, oh, I have a great arsenal of lenses, a great toolkit. Each lens is a different tool. And that's why I think my transition, mainly back into Sony was so easy for me, because every year I'm like, okay, what's like another lens I can get? And let's just kind of like inch my way towards, a better flow with lenses. And I feel like I've arrived, and I don't want to admit this to the public because I know in 6 months I'll be making another camera video probably, but I feel like I will be, dare I say, satisfied with where I am.
I feel
in
the same way.
world. So,
it feels like
yeah.
we're right there, right? Which isn't a
Yeah.
great thing to feel for if that's what you talk about on your channel.
Yeah.
But I know what you mean. And it sounds
But
like,
yeah.
I think that's where the whole fan concept comes from, is because it's hard when you get invested in glass, right? So I think I was like you, where I was kind of like getting some lenses here, getting some lenses there, but I wanted to just like build out a selection of lenses, but I didn't know which ones to build out. So, and like, I think a lot of people associate me with Sony. I didn't even invest heavily in Sony glass because I wasn't sure, is Canon gonna win this year? And then that'll be this satisfying answer, like you said, and then I'll just get RF lenses or something, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I would say that Sony won the day, and
Yeah.
so it's a good time to buy Sony glass if you haven't already. If you're
Yeah.
lucky enough that you're not heavily invested in any other system, start buying your Sony lenses, because
Yep.
that's the way we are right now. I think you
Exactly.
agree. It's Sony's
No,
time.
I agree. And I think that's a good place to end, unless you have anything else to send out in the world. This basically was just a podcast. Smash that like button if you made it to the end. How long have we been recording? 45 minutes.
We did
Remember
awesome.
when I was like, oh, this will be super short. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
this will be.
But then
this
you
will
had me
be-
on the phone. I tried to send somebody, this is no joke, I tried to send somebody like a 90-second just quick answer video clip. Like, hey, I got your message, thanks. Oh, here's the answer, I'll show it, whatever. The video was 10 minutes and 1 second long. And I was like, there you go. You want a
Well-
1 minute video from Gerald that gives you a 10-minute, like...
Exactly. But no, I think that's you've carved out a really great niche in the YouTube space for the more technical stuff, and people need those questions answered. So if you enjoyed our discussion, you shouldn't just subscribe to me, but go subscribe to Gerald. He has a lot of great videos. He has an A7s III video, and you have the R5 video coming around the corner.
Yeah.
Awesome,
Soon.
awesome. So make sure to check them out in the description below, all the places. I think I don't have anything other to say. Oh, the one thing, and I might just like insert this, the one thing I did want to mention when you were talking about the real world long recording things, all I did in the real world pre-YouTuber was a bunch of corporate videos that had like 45-minute interview sessions attached to it. So I'm not sure even if that real world argument is legitimate, because all I was doing was a bunch of corporate interviews of people in suits.
And that's a real world thing. The problem with real world is that it's only ever, the only people only ever apply to what they're doing is if everything else isn't in the real world.
Right,
and because we're in an era where, like, the reason why I take offense to it is obviously personally biased, but I know you'll support it, is that doing content for the web is a real thing in 2020, guys. You know what I mean?
Well,
like, it's a real thing.
I mean, it's like the realest thing.
It's one of the
Studios are
biggest,
shut
most
down.
real things. Yeah, exactly.
Like look at the
Do you
world we're
pay
living
your
in
bills?
right now.
Are you supporting the economy with like
Yeah.
the web?
Yeah.
Are you supporting the real world economy or the
The
crazy
web.
Sarah Dietschy world that she lives in that nobody else sees or whatever? You know what I mean? This is the real world, folks. Now I get it. That's just a phrase. Like, to all my like filmmaking friends out there, it's just a phrase to say like not lab tests.
Right,
And that's fine. Just don't make it negative to suggest that like you can't take Sarah's opinion because she makes things for the internet. She doesn't live in the real world. Other people out there want to know Sarah's take because they also want to do that, and they also are gonna support the economy and pay their bills and make money and whatever, you know.
Right,
It's
right,
real.
right.
It's real, damn it. Yeah.
We're real. And if it's not, you know, I'm sure Philip Bloom is going to release like a 2-hour review on the camera about maybe, you know, making like documentaries for CNN. But then again, those types of documentaries are probably now airing like on the web too. So all things, this is a soapbox that we could probably talk 40 more minutes about.
Your video right now looks like like an NBC talk show right now. Because
Hi,
this is
Sarah reporting live from New York City.
Because they're all like, you know, Stephen Colbert at home or whatever, right? It looks just like this. Like it's the same thing you're watching. You know, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway.
Epic. Let me know if you like this video. Hit that subscribe button down below for new videos every single week. Subscribe to Gerald and let me know your thoughts about the Sony A7s III, the Canon R5, the R6. Do you even care about cameras anymore? Because, hey, we got these things now. Let me know. Stay peachy. Okay, bye.